It all starts with a young man named Weiss who wanted to become strong at all costs. Driven by this single goal, he spent his days training against practice dummies. Weiss also faced beasts and monsters face to face to sharpen his skills in real combat. With pure determination, he delivered overwhelming strikes capable of cutting through any obstacle in his path. Thanks to all that daily effort, he finally reached the top and became the strongest swordsman in the entire world. Suddenly, Weiss narrows his eyes as he senses something very strange happening nearby. He looks toward the dark mountains during the night and notices a powerful, sinister presence approaching. Without wasting time, the swordsman crouches down and prepares to take action immediately. Then, Weiss gains momentum and flies toward the sky like a true beam of blue light. Meanwhile, two guards watch everything in confusion, commenting that the young man probably sensed a beast and flew through the air using just the power of his physical training, since he does not even know how to use magic. Quite close by, some beasts resembling dark dragons observe a peaceful village from the top of a cliff. In the midst of these monsters, a huge stone golem appears, carrying a little demon girl on its shoulder. The girl, named Dance, lets out a wicked laugh and celebrates that the village now belongs completely to her. She immediately orders her monsters to attack the place, telling them to destroy and take over everything they find in front of them. Dance gets extremely excited about the chance to show humans just how terrifying demons can truly be. However, her fun is interrupted when Weiss suddenly drops from the sky, landing right in front of the group of monsters. The demon girl gets a huge fright upon recognizing the face of the powerful swordsman, right there. She gets annoyed about running into him again, but Weiss calmly replies that he is the one who should be complaining about the situation. The young man then suggests they simply turn around and leave. Since he does not want to waste energy on a pointless fight, Dance gets furious at his mocking tone and yells that she just wanted to have some fun messing with a few humans. With her eyes glowing with anger, she claims that humans are nothing more than easy playthings for demons. Impatient, the girl orders her dragons to charge with everything to finish Weiss off quickly. However, with just one swift and precise movement of his giant sword, the Proto defeats all the monsters at once. Seeing that her helpers were easily defeated, Dance realizes she will need to summon something much more durable to beat him. She then activates a glowing magic circle and summons a gigantic fire golem to the battle. A colossal creature of glowing hot stone emerges right before Weiss, covering the area with an intense glow. The demon orders with a laugh for the monster to crush the young man until he is completely finished. Weiss calmly analyzes the earthen enemy and prepares for the attack, while channeling a strong blue energy into his own fist. He knows that this type of creature heals itself endlessly, so he decides to focus all his strength on hitting a single vital spot once and for all. With an extremely powerful punch, the Proto strikes the golem and causes a gigantic explosion that destroys the monster instantly. Dance watches the scene completely shocked and unable to believe what just happened. She starts yelling that it is pure cheating, while Weiss calmly explains that body enhancement is the simplest and yet the most powerful magic that exists. The young man adds by saying that devastating power is just the result of all his exhausting daily training. Throwing a tantrum, the girl complains that he always shows up to ruin her solo fun and asks if he is in love with her or if he is just a stalker. Weiss answers with all the honesty in the world that he prefers well-behaved and polite girls, leaving the demon even more annoyed at feeling truly rejected. While the two continue arguing in the middle of the night, someone in a hood begins to observe them from afar in silence. A mysterious young woman with a purple hood gives a wicked smile while gesturing with her hand. She thinks to herself that the two will be the perfect test subjects for her plan, starting to focus a powerful magical energy in the palm of her hand. In the blink of an eye, a huge glowing magic circle appears right under Weiss's feet. The swordsman immediately realizes he fell into a trap, while Dance also panics upon noticing the mysterious glow around them. A colossal column of light rises from the ground and completely swallows the two before they can make any move. The mysterious girl watches the light rise until it vanishes into the sky. Satisfied with the result of her ambush, silence soon returns to the dark forest, illuminated only by the faint glow of the crescent moon. Sometime later, Dance begins to slowly regain consciousness and opens her eyes with difficulty. She realizes she is lying on the ground of some kind of abandoned ruin, covered by a blanket next to a warm campfire. Weiss approaches, carrying a few pieces of wood, and calmly comments that she has finally woken up from her sleep. The demon girl looks to the side and sees that her two companion monsters are also lying there very close to her. However, upon looking at herself and realizing her current state, Dance lets out a desperate scream of pure embarrassment. Trying to calm her down, Weiss explains that they were hit by high-level dimensional magic that suddenly transported them very far away. He adds very naturally that he had to remove her outer clothes just to check if there were any serious injuries on her body. Mentioning that even her beasts were super worried, Weiss gets even closer and asks if she is all right since she is being so quiet, mentioning that he needs to examine her better to ensure she is not hurt. Embarrassed and wrapped in her blanket, the demon girl starts yelling in anger and throwing tiny punches at the young man with all her might. Weiss complains that he has absolutely no interest in her body and was just providing medical aid, but the young woman fires back saying his comment was extremely rude and calls him an idiot. Putting the argument aside, the young man states that they are in serious trouble and suggests a temporary truce so she can see the current situation with her own eyes. The demon girl gets somewhat confused and worried about the swordsman's serious warning. She then decides to step out of the makeshift shelter to investigate the surroundings under Weiss's watchful eye. Looking up, she is faced with a completely destroyed cityscape overtaken by vegetation under the nightlight. The young woman is totally speechless and shocked as she notices the details of that strange place. She panics upon noticing that there are no less than 3 crescent moons shining together in the dark sky. Even her faithful companion monsters seem scared and without any understanding of what is happening there. Back near the campfire, Weiss asks if she managed to calm down a bit, and the girl answers quietly that she did, sad and curled up. She asks in a trembling voice what is going to happen to them from now on. The young man looks away and sincerely confesses that he has absolutely no idea. She insists and asks if there is any possibility of them being able to return to the world they came from. Weiss repeats that unfortunately, he still does not know the answer to that question. The girl complains that he could be a bit more optimistic, but he fires back saying he cannot lie about things he truly does not know. However, Weiss states with determination that he does not intend to stand still waiting and that he will do everything to find a way back home. He looks intently at her and asks for her help on this difficult journey they will have ahead of them. The young man then makes a solemn promise that he will protect her from any danger until they manage to return. In the face of such sincere and heroic words, the demon girl is left completely speechless with blushing cheeks. Not knowing how to handle the embarrassment, she hides her face and starts complaining that he is very annoying for playing the charming hero at a time like that, leaving Weiss confused about why she is so angry. Suddenly, a loud noise coming from the nearby bushes interrupts their conversation and puts them on high alert. Weiss turns quickly toward the noise, trying to identify what is hiding in the darkness of the forest. The brush begins to shake with even more force, revealing that something truly huge is about to come out of there. It is then that a bizarre and terrifying creature with a giant maw in place of a face leaps fiercely in their direction. Weiss draws his weapon to face the beast, while the demon, whose name is Anis, steps forward, bravely telling him to back off and let her handle the situation. She ponders that she does not have enough magical energy yet to summon her most powerful beast, but decides to use her second best option available at the moment. Anis then conjures a summoning spell and calls for one of her fearsome wolf-like beasts to fight by her side. However, even before the summoning is complete, the bizarre creature attacks violently and tosses her protective golem away with extreme ease. The girl is left completely frozen upon seeing the devastating strength of the enemy monster. She falls into despair upon realizing that her power flow was interrupted and that her magic simply refuses to activate in that place. Left without any defense, Anis watches in horror as the terrible creature advances toward her to finish her off, unable to move due to absolute terror. She closes her eyes expecting the worst. At the final second, Weiss appears like a human shield in front of her and takes the full impact of the monster's brutal attack. The blow is so violent that the two are thrown backward in the middle of a cloud of dust and shattered rocks. Anis screams Weiss's name desperately upon seeing him thrown on the ground, completely battered and bruised. The young man tries to calm her down, saying his body can take the hit because of his training, but she cries, pointing out that he is lying and bleeding all over. In great pain, the swordsman realizes his body enhancement technique has also stopped working and wonders what is wrong with that mysterious world. While the monster approaches again to finish the job, the demon girl tries to use her summoning magic in a desperate way, but nothing happens. She starts crying in frustration and panic, not understanding why her powers failed at the absolute worst possible moment. Suddenly, a very strong red light shines between the two, activating a mysterious magic circle right under Weiss. Anis looks at the scene in surprise, not understanding where that mysterious and comforting life energy is coming from. In the midst of the scarlet glow, a colossal silhouette of a black wolf with glowing red eyes begins to materialize before them. Shocked by the size of that mystical creature, the girl whispers the swordsman's name, unable to believe what she is witnessing. The powerful black wolf lets out a deafening howl that makes all the ground around tremble with absolute majesty. With impressive speed, the beast charges against the giant-mouthed monster to protect the two young people. The beast's red eyes glow with a wild fury as it focuses totally on destroying the opponent with just a single strike of its sharp claws. The wolf shreds the terrible enemy creature and puts an end to the imminent danger. Anis observes the creature dissipate and realizes that imposing physical form belongs exactly to Fenrir, the wolf beast she was trying to summon earlier. However, she is left even more perplexed to notice that Weiss's body seems to have merged somehow with the powerful summoned creature. The giant wolf places its paw firmly over the head of the defeated monster, showing that the combat is finally over. Then, the imposing beast raises its head and lets out a powerful howl toward the three moons in the sky. It continues snarling loudly, demonstrating all its brutal strength while celebrating the victory. Dance approaches cautiously and whispers the young man's name, trying to see if he can still hear her. However, the giant wolf turns its glowing red eyes directly toward the girl with a terrifying look. Upon hearing a violent roar right in her direction, she trembles in terror, realizing the swordsman seems to have completely lost control of himself. The colossal beast positions itself in a threatening way right before the young woman, who is completely defenseless. Desperate, Dance thinks to herself that she needs to find a way to stop him, feeling guilty that he ended up in that wild situation. Seeing no other quick way out, and seeing the monster step even closer, the young woman lets out a scream of terror. In an act of pure desperation, she takes a deep breath and delivers a well-aimed kick with all her might against the creature. The strike hits with extreme precision right in the area between the giant wolf's legs. The beast opens its red eyes wide in absolute shock and agony upon feeling the unbearable pain of that low blow. The pain is so absurd that the powerful wolf's soul almost seems to leave its body from pure weakness. Unable to withstand the devastating impact to its sensitive spot, the creature simply collapses onto its back on the ground, completely defeated. Dance wipes the sweat from her forehead and breathes a sigh of relief, celebrating silently for hitting the monster's weak point dead on. Right after, she notices a sudden change in the fallen body and opens her eyes wide in surprise. To her total relief, the transformation undoes itself and Weiss returns to his usual human form, lying on the sand without any injuries. At dawn, the young man wakes up confused and, upon hearing her explanation, asks if the girl got hurt in any way during the commotion. Holding his lower region with an expression of extreme pain, Weiss complains that the area is hurting terribly and asks what on earth happened while he was unconscious. He comments that he had never heard of anyone merging with a summons before and praises his companion's advanced magical skills. Dance gets very self-conscious and yells that she has absolutely no idea how she pulled off that feat, confessing she does not have that much magical talent. She theorizes that, because they were transported to a completely different world, the very nature and rules of the magic they knew must have changed. Weiss agrees and remembers that he himself was also unable to activate his usual physical enhancement magic during the battle. The swordsman gets worried and comments that their situation is truly grave if neither of them can use their normal powers in that place. However, he ponders that this mysterious fusion ability might be the only key they have to manage to survive there. The young man explains that if her magic can turn him into a powerful beast whenever necessary, he will be able to fight and defend them from any danger. Weiss smiles in a friendly way and says that if they work as a team, they will surely find a way back home, leaving the demon girl quite flustered. Trying to hide her shyness, Dance puffs out her chest and gives a proud laugh, saying she has no other choice but to help that poor human. She continues bragging happily, stating it would be impossible to refuse a request for help when he decided to depend so much on the great Dance Sama. Suddenly, a loud noise in the bushes startles the girl, who takes a little jump in fright and hides behind the young man. However, Weiss just observes calmly and realizes it is only Dance's monsters that have just returned from a scouting patrol. The swordsman discovers that the beasts found a water source nearby and decides to follow the monsters immediately, leaving the young woman indignant to see how quickly her own servants became friends with him. Shortly after, the group arrives at a beautiful lake of crystal-clear waters surrounded by ancient ruins under a clear, sunny sky. Dance wastes no time and leaps happily into the water, celebrating how refreshing and relaxing the swim is. Meanwhile, the young man observes the place and comments that this spot is excellent, as it guarantees drinking water and the chance to get fish to feed themselves. Even so, Weiss knows that camp is only temporary and that they urgently need clues to return home. Suddenly, a desperate scream from the demon girl echoes through the lake, startling the swordsman, who turns quickly to see what happened. A gigantic white sea serpent emerges from the depths of the lake right behind Dance, leaving her in total panic. The young woman swims desperately toward the shore, begging for Weiss to save her from that colossal monster. Analyzing the size of the enemy, the young man realizes they stand no chance of winning with their current strength and tells her to perform a new summoning immediately. Weiss yells with determination for them to try to perform the fusion with the sea monster to be able to fight the enemy on equal terms. Scared, Dance hesitates for a moment and asks if he is sure about this, fearing the swordsman might lose consciousness and go wild again. The young man replies firmly that he will use all his willpower to maintain control of his mind and insists for her to hurry up with the spell. Seeing his determination, the demon girl takes a deep breath and agrees to go through with the process. Once and for all, she then activates her glowing transmutation circle and begins the summoning of her aquatic creature. An intense dark and red aura begins to envelop the young man's body, starting the process of physical transformation. His hand begins to change shape drastically, covering itself with dark scales and the sharp claws of a sea beast. Thanks to the fusion spell, Weiss takes the form of a powerful fishman with bluish skin and glowing red eyes. Now transformed into a powerful warrior of the seas, the Proto stands tall, ready to face the colossal threat that emerged from the lake. Even so, he lets out a few low snarls while making a huge mental effort not to let wild instincts take over his conscious mind. Weiss continues fighting his wild instincts while roaring in discomfort, leaving Dance completely frightened on the lakeshore. The demon girl gets extremely worried, realizing the young man seems to be losing his consciousness to his animal side again. At that exact moment, the gigantic white sea serpent resurfaces from the waters right behind her, with its yellow eyes glowing. Not knowing what to do against that terrible giant monster, she starts complaining in panic about the swordsman's lack of control. Suddenly, a great crash occurs in the water as the combat between the two monsters finally begins for real. In his new marine form, Weiss charges bravely and manages to hold the sharp-toothed maw of the huge serpent with his bare hands. Dance watches the scene in awe and yells with joy upon seeing that he managed to protect her in time from a terrible fate. Demonstrating incredible mental control, the swordsman firmly states that he will not lose to any enemy until he manages to take her back home. With a powerful battle cry, Weiss uses all his physical strength to subdue the giant sea monster. He then channels all the water energy into his right fist to deliver an incredibly powerful punch to the creature. The devastating punch strikes the serpent's head, causing it to shake violently from the impact of the blow. Excited by the young man's performance, Dance starts cheering for him and yells for him to spin his whole body to land the final strike. Following his companion's instructions, Weiss spins with agility and delivers a sequence of brutal attacks against the opponent. Concentrating the rest of his energy into his sharp claws, the young man prepares to deliver the blow of mercy. With an extremely swift and precise movement, the Proto strikes the enemy with maximum force and ends the combat. The gigantic white sea serpent finally collapses lifeless in the water after suffering Weiss's fatal blow. Dance celebrates the young man's spectacular victory a lot, although she finds that messy scene a bit unpleasant. Out of breath and exhausted on top of the defeated monster, the warrior tries to catch his breath after spending so much strength. However, a strange and wicked purple mist begins to envelop Weiss, indicating that the wild consciousness called Kuga is trying to take control of his body. The transformed young man leaps fiercely toward Dance, who immediately realizes her companion is out of his mind and coming to attack her. Having no patience to deal with that animal fury again, the young woman prepares herself, annoyed, to apply the only solution she knows. She then repeats the method and delivers her famous and painful low kick directly to the uncontrolled warrior's sensitive area. After a brief and hilarious time skip that spares the viewer from seeing the painful scene again, calm finally returns to the beautiful lake. Weiss appears lying on the wooden ground, completely spent, while complaining that the pain from that side effect kick is simply unbearable. Sometime later, Dance appears all happy wearing new clothes her monsters found and announces she set aside a clean set for him too. The young demon then explains they cannot stay there long because of the dangers and decides to patrol the area with her monsters while he rests. The swordsman thanks her quietly for the help, but soon gets a start upon glancing at a detail on his own body. To his astonishment, the fingers of his right hand still display the dark, sharp claws of his monster form. Weiss gets extremely worried, thinking that his physical transformation might not have been totally undone this time. Fortunately, after a few seconds of concentration, his hand returns to its normal human state before his eyes. Despite the temporary relief, the young man is left thoughtful and apprehensive about the mysteries of that strange fusion with the beasts. A short time later, Dance comes running back from her scouting, accompanied by her monsters, and calls for her companion urgently. With a frightened expression, the young woman announces they have just found a person fallen and unconscious in the middle of the forest. Upon investigating the scene, they find a completely broken wooden wagon and a blonde girl passed out on the dirt ground. The young demon points to the mysterious girl dressed in modern combat attire who appears to be badly hurt. Weiss analyzes the accident scene and, checking the girl's breathing, notices that she is fortunately still alive. Seeing no serious superficial wounds, the young man concludes they need to transport her as soon as possible to a real doctor. Dance is confused by the request, but the young man explains they are going to fix the old wagon right there so they can transport her safely. He adds that it would be far too dangerous to leave her abandoned there, and that if they follow the road, they will surely find some inhabited town. With great confidence, the warrior states that fixing things is a basic military skill and asks Dance to look after the patient while he works on the wood. While Weiss works hard repairing the wagon with the help of her own monsters, the young demon sits on watch, observing the injured girl. Dance stares at the unconscious girl in silence with a slightly bored and thoughtful expression. She ends up remembering the heroic promise Weiss made earlier about never losing and protecting her, which leaves her somewhat touched. A bit embarrassed by her own memories, she makes an annoyed pout and grumbles quietly that she hates when he says such embarrassing things. Next, the young woman looks at the young man working happily alongside the golem and wonders what goes on in the mind of such a peculiar warrior. Weiss, for his part, can only think about how that heavy and exhausting work serves as an excellent physical workout for his muscles. A short time later, the wagon is finally ready, and the group begins to travel down the forest road with the golem pulling the makeshift vehicle. Inside the wooden wagon, the blonde girl begins to wake up gradually. Groaning with a lot of nausea due to the violent jolting, Weiss notices the discomfort of the two passengers and admits that the quick repair left the wagon's structure shaking too much along the way. Despite the motion sickness from the bumpy ride, Dance gives a slight smile, thinking that this is much better than walking on foot, and celebrates that she will soon have the comforts of civilization back. Observing the wooden planks of the wagon, Weiss reflects in silence that despite traveling toward a town, they still have no clue how to return home. He ponders that this world is filled with absurdly strong creatures, and that to survive, he first needs to recover his own combat strength. Suddenly, the unconscious blonde girl moves and sits up in the wagon, leaving the swordsman and Dance quite surprised by her rapid awakening. Noticing their surprise, the young blonde kindly offers to be their guide if they are on their way to a nearby town. Thus, the group continues their long journey down the dirt road under the command of the huge golem pulling the makeshift vehicle. The blonde girl kneels politely and introduces herself as Marcia, thanking them immensely for their help in saving her life. With her usual naive friendliness, Dance introduces herself happily and introduces Weiss, saying he is just a strong gorilla. Weiss pulls his companion aside and whispers that she should not reveal their real names so easily to strangers in a mysterious world. The young demon panics upon realizing the mistake, but the swordsman sighs and says it is too late now to try to fix the slip. Weiss then ignores the confusion and asks Marcia about the exact location of the town she mentioned. The guide explains that if they keep following that winding road beyond the mountains, they will soon reach a town called Toguna. Marcia adds that she was also on her way there, but ended up being attacked by surprise by a terrible monster that lived in the lake. Very casually, the Proto activates his spatial magic and brings forth the giant head of the dead sea serpent, asking if that was the monster she was talking about. The two girls let out a scream of terror at the bizarre appearance, while the young man explains he just had a feeling and decided to store the creature in his magic inventory. As the wagon travels on, two figures mounted on horseback appear on the horizon and begin to observe their approach with a lot of suspicion. One of the soldiers points to the strange group and alerts his leader, a captain with light blue hair, who agrees to investigate that unusual situation. The captain rides up to the road and orders loudly for them to stop the wagon immediately for an inspection. The armed riders block the path, surrounding the wooden vehicle pulled by the imposing stone golem. With a commanding posture, the leader demands explanations regarding the presence of the giant monster she saw briefly moments ago. Trying to calm things down, Marcia intervenes quickly and explains to the guards that they are just innocent merchants who were attacked on the road. The young blonde insists that the boys are her saviors and that there is absolutely no reason to suspect their integrity. However, the captain is not convinced and points suspiciously at the golem and the dragon accompanying the group. Dance soon butts into the conversation and proudly explains that those creatures are actually her faithful magical pets. She adds with a smug smile, stating she is a professional tamer, highly capable of controlling wild beasts. The leader of the riders stares at the demon with seriousness after hearing that bold statement. Without hesitating, the blue-haired captain coldly declares that Dance is under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy. The young demon opens her eyes wide and is totally shocked to receive that arrest order. So suddenly, the officer explains that the region has been suffering constant attacks from wild beasts, and since Dance claims to be able to control them, she becomes the prime suspect for causing the chaos. However, the argument is interrupted when another soldier arrives galloping in a hurry and desperately warns that a pack of monsters is heading right toward them. The captain gets alarmed by the news and regrets that those creatures decided to attack again so soon. She tells Weiss's group to seek shelter immediately to ensure their safety and rides with her men toward the imminent combat. As the guards pull away, Weiss suggests that they also participate in the battle to help defend the area. Dance thinks the idea is complete madness and asks if it would not be smarter to take advantage of that perfect distraction to run away from there. The young man explains that helping them is the best way to prove they are not enemies, besides confessing he has something special he would like to test in combat. The demon girl stares at her companion with an expression of total doubt and curiosity. In the middle of the valley, an immense horde of wild monsters advances furiously, raising a huge curtain of dust. One of the soldiers anxiously reports that there are about 10 gigantic white ogres leading that fearsome enemy pack. Aware that she has only 5 men at her disposal, the captain draws her sword and orders everyone to prepare to fight for their own lives. With unwavering determination, she raises her weapon and commands a full cavalry charge against the monsters. The 5 brave riders charge at high speed against the army of ogres in the middle of the battlefield. The captain demonstrates great combat skill by delivering a well-aimed strike that cuts down the first monster to approach. She maintains her firm posture on the horse, while the blue fluid of the defeated enemies begins to spread around her. However, the situation gets complicated when a smaller ogre leaps fiercely onto one of the soldiers, injuring him severely amid screams of despair. Another guard panics completely upon facing a colossal creature with a giant maw about to swallow him whole. The captain realizes in horror that the opponents are much more powerful than she imagined, and notes she will not be able to protect her men and fight at the same time. In that moment of distraction, one of the vertical-jawed beasts sneaks up right behind her to deliver a surprise attack. Noticing the deadly presence behind her back, the blue-haired warrior curses, knowing she will not have time to defend against the fatal blow. However, before the monster can touch her, an incredibly strong punch strikes the beast's face, sending fluid through the air and saving the captain's life. The leader of the guards looks in shock at her savior and immediately recognizes the young man who was in the wagon moments before. Weiss positions himself for the fight and calmly announces he came to serve as the reinforcement they so badly needed to win that battle. The captain says he is being ridiculous, as he does not even carry a weapon to fight against that pack of monsters. Weiss stares at the officer with seriousness and replies firmly that he does indeed possess a secret weapon for combat. The officer tries to stop him, yelling for him to wait, but the young man has already advanced and placed himself right in front of the gigantic white ogre. He concentrates his senses and focuses on his connection to the sea monster's energy that now runs through his veins to activate his power. Weiss raises his fist and lets out a powerful battle cry while activating a brilliant red magic circle around his arm. An immense explosion of energy emerges from the young man's fist, leaving the captain completely jaw-dropped at such power. The young man's right arm instantly transforms into the scaled and armored limb of the powerful sea monster. The officer watches the fantastic transformation, unable to believe the magical strength emanating from the young man. Without wasting time, the warrior leaps toward the ogre and delivers a devastating punch that generates an immense wave of blue energy. The soldiers of the patrol watch everything shocked, commenting fearfully about who that mysterious man could be, who defeated an ogre with a single blow. Weiss takes advantage of the moment and shouts with enthusiasm to the riders, encouraging them to push the beasts back all at once. With his armored fist sparking electricity, the swordsman leaps again toward the center of the pack of wild ogres. He hits the ground with an overwhelming punch that spreads a destructive shockwave across the entire battlefield. The captain observes in wonder as the young man faces alone and defeats multiple powerful monsters without any difficulty. She takes advantage of the opening created by Weiss and immediately orders her men to regroup to reorganize the defensive line. With her sword pointed forward, the leader commands a final attack to sweep the remaining monsters away all at once. The brave riders advance under the command of their leader to finish off the ogres that were still trying to fight. Weiss finishes his last opponent with one more destructive punch that ends the violent combat once and for all, standing on top of the huge defeated ogre. The young man quietly comments that that was the last monster of the horde. The captain approaches to thank him for the crucial help that saved everyone's lives, but she cannot help but look intrigued at his armored arm. She decides not to press the matter out of respect, commenting it would be rude to investigate her savior's secrets, which leaves the young man somewhat relieved. The officer then flashes a friendly smile and says she ended up forgetting to ask the young warrior's name. The young man extends his arm to greet her and introduces himself, saying his name is Weiss. To his total surprise, the captain smiles and reveals that her name is also exactly Weiss. The young man finds amusement in the fun coincidence and shakes her hand, promising in a friendly way to buy her a drink at their next meeting. The officer accepts the invitation with a smile, but kindly asks for him to change his arm back to normal before they continue their conversation. With the end of the combat, the quiet valley is filled with the inert bodies of all the ogres that were defeated in an overwhelming fashion. Dance and Marcia walk slowly through the battlefield, with the young blonde still amazed to realize the extent of the damage the swordsman caused on his own. Marcia comments, in surprise that she has heard of entire orders of knights being destroyed by just one beast, and wonders what his true power is. Feeling a bit awkward, Dance tries to cover up the secret and makes up that Weiss just awakened a mysterious and scary ability all of a sudden. Suddenly, the huge body of the ogre leader begins to glow intensely with a reddish energy. Startling the young demon super excited, Dance runs close to the glowing monster and celebrates for managing to capture such a gigantic creature. She touches the monster and gets very confused when a strong, bright pink light begins to emanate from her hand. All of a sudden, an immense magical star appears floating above the body of the defeated ogre, illuminating the entire valley with an intense glow. A floating system screen with a cute drawing of the ogre appears in the air, successfully announcing that the creature has been transformed into a new pet. Next, the huge beast disappears and leaves only a small glowing blue crystal lying on the ground before Dance and Marcia, who are left understanding absolutely nothing. Dance opens her mouth in total shock upon seeing the crystal, while the young blonde guide gets completely dizzy and confused by that magical strangeness, unable to contain herself. The demon girl lets out a desperate scream that echoes through the mountains, asking what on earth just happened there. Sometime later, the group arrives in the town and comes across the beautiful wooden sign of an inn called Hushute. A friendly waitress serves generous plates of food and mugs of refreshments, welcoming them to the Hushute Hotel. Dance takes a huge gulp from her mug and happily celebrates that she is finally feeling truly alive again. The group dines happily, while Marcia comments that the mountain vegetable dishes of that inn are very famous and encourages them to eat as much as they want. Weiss stares at the blonde with seriousness and asks if she is sure she wants to cover all their lodging expenses. The guide smiles and replies that paying for the rooms is the least she can do for her saviors, besides ensuring that Captain Weiss interceded for them and that they will have no financial issues. Hearing talk about money, Dance stops chewing for a moment and gets thoughtful with a new idea. She pulls out the blue crystal they got from the ogre and asks if they could not try to sell that precious stone to raise funds. Marcia examines the glowing object with curiosity, commenting that the stone is indeed very pretty, but that she has no idea what it is and doubts anyone will buy it. The blonde gets thoughtful and reflects in silence on the mysterious and devastating combination of the young man's physical strength and the young demon's beast domination power. With a serious look, Marcia comments quietly that their extraordinary abilities closely resemble the fearsome army of the Demon King. Weiss finds the term strange and asks confused about what this Demon King thing is, causing the blonde girl to stammer in embarrassment and quickly ask him to ignore the unimportant comment. While they are at the inn, Dance asks for one more mug very lively, leaving Weiss somewhat thoughtful with all that excitement. Outside the lodging, the night sky of that world displays 3 crescent moons that shine in a way quite different from normal. Once in the room, Dance throws herself onto the bed, totally satisfied with having eaten and drunk so much at dinner. She celebrates the comfort of the soft mattress for being back to civilization, while Weiss comments from outside that he is glad to see the two of them having fun sitting on the bed next to her. Marcia asks if it is really all right for her to share the room with her demon friend, with a self-conscious little smile. The guide questions if Dance and Weiss are not a couple. Dance turns completely red with embarrassment and denies everything, screaming, making Marcia laugh and comment that she thought their relationship was just like the ones in romance books. Marcia continues teasing by saying she imagined a romantic story with a man and a woman surviving alone in the forest, leaving her friend even more flustered with that wild imagination. Super embarrassed, Dance begs to change the subject and start talking about something actually fun. Marcia gets thoughtful for a few moments, trying to find an interesting topic to talk about. She then reveals that that bizarre world where they are is actually located entirely underground. Overhearing the conversation from outside the room, Weiss is shocked by the revelation regarding the existence of an underground world. Intrigued by the revelation, Weiss crosses his arms near the window and asks what exactly that mysterious place is. Dance explains she heard that all kinds of objects and debris simply fall down from up there every now and then. She says that according to Marcia, the place is known as the bottom of the world, and that even some humans end up falling down there by accident. Weiss begins to reflect and realizes that the people who plunge from up there are called the Fallen, which means he and Dance also fit into that category. While the young man realizes that the rules of that world are totally different from everything he knew, Dance warns that there is an even more important detail to this story. The demon girl reveals with enthusiasm that Marcia has already personally met another fallen person in the past. She points to her companion and says that if they can talk to this person, maybe they will discover a valuable clue on how to get back home. Bragging about her great investigation skills, Weiss cracks a sincere smile and recognizes that that information is a true step forward for their plans. Dance gets extremely proud of herself and asks for confirmation on how awesome she is, receiving the young man's humorous agreement. With her eyes shining with excitement, she asks to be praised even more for her beautiful work. Weiss gets a bit awkward and confused by the sudden demand, but she insists that she wants to receive much more praise. Not knowing quite what to do, the young man starts patting her head in a slightly awkward way while saying she is a good girl. Annoyed by his simple praise, Dance yells out very loudly that he is terrible at praising people, with the complaint echoing through the inn in the middle of the night. Silence soon returns, and the Haoshute Inn becomes completely calm under the light of the moons. In the girls' room, Marcia and Dance sleep soundly and rest after a long and tiring day. In his own quarters, Weiss also sleeps peacefully and enjoys the comfortable bed of the inn. However, the young man's sleep is suddenly interrupted when he opens his eyes upon hearing a strange noise coming from outside. A terrifying crash echoes through the area, and a gigantic toad-like creature appears at the top of the town walls. The huge, bluish beast with red eyes begins to invade the place, activating alarms that a terrible beast has appeared. The local guards spring into action immediately, running to take their combat positions while shouting to evacuate all the guests from the hotel. One of the officers quickly approaches Captain Weiss to report that all units are already properly positioned for defense. With a serious and focused look, Captain Weiss firmly orders not to allow the monster to get near the residential area under any circumstances. She commands the archers to perform a joint volley, and a rain of arrows is launched toward the invader. The massive aerial attack strikes dead center on the spiky back of the gigantic monster in a relentless fashion. However, the giant toad keeps advancing as if nothing had happened. Without showing any sign of injury, Captain Weiss gets extremely worried upon realizing that her soldiers' arrows failed to even scratch the opponent's tough skin. At that moment, the terrible beast opens its immense maw in a threatening way before the defensive army. The toad fires its long and powerful tongue at high speed in the direction of the Allied forces. The overwhelming strike tosses several soldiers high into the air amid screams of despair while destroying the stone ground. Next, the tongue whips rapidly toward Captain Weiss, leaving her subordinates in panic. The leader of the patrol watches the deadly advance without finding enough time to dodge the imminent impact. Suddenly, a loud collision sound happens right in front of her and stops the beast's destructive attack. The Proto-Weiss appears just in time with his armored arm and blocks the monster's tongue, leaving Captain Weiss very relieved by the heroic intervention. The young man lets out a powerful battle cry while gathering his strength to strike back against the colossal enemy. He leaps high into the air in an agile manner and advances determined to deliver a well-aimed strike right on top of the creature's head. Weiss strikes the toad with an extremely strong punch using his heavy claws, but realizes the animal's hide is incredibly dense and resistant. Upon noticing that even his direct physical strikes are absorbed by the rubbery skin, the warrior concludes he will need a much more powerful technique to win that combat. He pulls away quickly and positions himself on the ground before the beast, trying to come up with a new strategy to manage to penetrate that giant monster's defense. While looking for a way out, Weiss suddenly notices the water fountain of the inn and realizes he found the perfect solution to his problem. He activates his control magic and makes a great jet of water shoot up toward the sky at high speed. The young man concentrates as he feels the energy of the sea serpent, one of the monsters tamed by Dance, running through his entire body in perfect sync. With his arm fully transformed, he decides to use all that power to gather the fountain water around his armored fist. Then, he focuses on compressing the huge amount of running water to increase the pressure and make it even more destructive. Weiss stands ready for the attack while maintaining a fully concentrated high-pressure sphere in his right hand. With a focused look, he decides to fire all that energy all at once against the opponent. The powerful jet of compressed water strikes the giant toad with an crushing force that pierces its tough skin without any difficulty. Captain Weiss and her soldiers watch that whole scene, completely shocked at the young man's absurd power. After dissipating the attack, the warrior remains firm on the battlefield while the others shout his name in a sign of relief. Dance comes running right after and apologizes for oversleeping, but the young man reassures his friend, saying the monster was not even that strong of an opponent. Upon coming across the huge, defeated creature, the young demon makes a face of disgust and asks if that is just a giant toad. She decides to stretch her finger toward the monster's body, remembering that if she touches it, maybe the same thing that happened with the ogre before will go down. As soon as her finger touches the toad's skin, a strong reddish light begins to glow intensely, startling the girl immediately. A system screen appears confirming that she managed to tame the terrible demon toad, leaving a new glowing magic crystal in the air. The soldiers guarding the scene whisper, startled among themselves, trying to understand how that mysterious young woman's domination ability works. Weiss and Dance stand in complete silence before the curious looks of everyone around. While observing the sky under the 3 moons, the young man feels a strange sensation that someone powerful is watching the two of them from very far away. Indeed, an enigmatic voice emerges from beyond, observing the actions of the travelers and commenting with mockery about the adorable cuteness of the new fallen who arrived there. High in the sky, a stunning woman with long golden hair and angelic wings observes the globe that displays the duo down below. She smiles calmly, while wondering if this new group of fallen will finally manage to bring some kind of fun to her life. At another elevated point, a mysterious blue-haired figure observes the small fortified village of Toguna from the top of a mountain. This mysterious warrior, who possesses wolf-like features and beastly legs, floats in a threatening way before the bluish glow of the night. She glares at the village with a cold look, totally devoid of any emotion, while the wind shakes her long hair. The next day, Weiss and Dance go to a clearing in the forest to train together with the pet beasts she managed to tame. The young man closes his eyes and takes a deep breath to concentrate all his spiritual energy and test the limits of his power. Opening his eyes suddenly, an intense black and blue electricity begins to spark around his face in a threatening way. His right arm instantly transforms into the armored limb of the sea monster without him needing to make much effort. He observes the transformation surprised and realizes that now he can already alter specific parts of his own body completely freely. The young man deduces that with enough training, he will manage to transform other parts. Although he still needs Dance's magical energy to perform the full body fusion, Dance listens to her friend's explanations with a curious expression, while patting her little pet dragon. Weiss comments that this new ability must be the result of the different physical laws of that world, and says that even without knowing the details, they need to discover as much as possible about their capabilities. Motivated by her companion's progress, the demon girl pouts and firmly declares that she also wants to do something awesome so she does not get left behind. She thinks a bit about how to impress, and suddenly remembers the glowing blue crystal she obtained by defeating the ogre the day before. With a huge smile, she theorizes that if she throws that stone on the ground, an extremely strong and reliable monster will appear on the spot, leaving Weiss very skeptical about the idea. Without listening to her partner, Dance launches the crystal forward with a dramatic pose and yells for the ogre to appear as if she were in a pocket monster battle. However, the stone just bounces in a disappointing way on the grass and rolls a bit to the side without anything happening. The two are left staring at the object thrown on the ground in an awkward silence that takes over the entire clearing. Suddenly, an extremely strong purple glow emanates from the crystal out of nowhere, making the girl scream in surprise at the delayed magical reaction. A colossal and furry creature with 4 red eyes and terrifying horns appears before the duo, covering the entire clearing with its gigantic shadow. Weiss and Dance take a step back, completely terrified upon realizing that the terrible monster truly appeared from the crystal. The young man swallows hard upon noting that they can indeed capture enemy beasts and force them to obey their orders. The demon girl processes the information for a moment with her eyes wide open while a genius idea begins to form in her mind. She brags, all blushing, asking if she is not a complete genius for discovering this, but Weiss cuts her excitement short, immediately saying she definitely is not. Shortly after, the two return to the Haoshute Inn to have breakfast and rest from the exhausting training in the forest. At the dining room table, Marcia displays a sly little smile filled with ulterior motives while waiting for her friends to sit down. While cutting her steak, Dance finds that suspicious attitude strange and questions the reason for all that smug little smile on the blonde's face. The guide tries to cover it up in a playful way, commenting, "She was just thinking about how difficult it must be for the two of them to sneak out so early for a secret romantic date." Marcia continues rambling about how romantic it is to meet in the forest under the dawn mist, just like in her romance books, leaving Dance desperate to disprove that whole absurd story. Suddenly, Captain Weiss approaches their table from behind and comments with a smile about how the group has already started the day in a very lively and energetic way. The captain approaches Weiss in a friendly manner and greets him with a lot of respect before everyone. She notices she has not formally introduced herself to the girls yet and reveals that her name is Helka, the captain of the knights there. Marcia listens with attention and asks politely if the captain needs any help from their group. Helka confirms and explains that the priest responsible for that region wants to personally thank Weiss for defeating the beast that threatened the village. She then extends an official invitation for everyone to visit the local church where the religious leader awaits them. While they walk, Dance gets super excited imagining what kind of reward or gift cards they will receive, but Weiss asks her not to raise too many expectations coming from a religious man. The demon girl Retruka saying her pet monsters also helped a lot in the defense, and that it would be fair to split the reward with all of them. Marcia agrees and remembers that the beast protected her bravely during the goblin attack, feeling she should also return that favor somehow. Hearing talk of food, Dance suddenly opens her eyes wide and falls into despair upon realizing she completely forgot to feed her monstrous companions. Weiss lets out a sigh and says he himself will take care of feeding the beasts while the girls travel on to meet with the priest. Meanwhile, in the forest clearing, the stone golem and the little dragon rest peacefully waiting for their owners. Suddenly, the silence is broken when an arrow strikes dead center on the stone golem's head. Leaving the little dragon on high alert, a hooded figure approaches holding a sharp dagger and coldly comments that not even a shot to the head would be enough to bring down that stone creature. Several other masked men emerge from the shadows with their blades drawn, determined to shred the beast once and for all. Cornered, and without their owners around, the two pets tremble with fear in the face of that cowardly ambush. One of the invaders wields his dual daggers with skill, preparing to deliver the fatal blow. The beasts back away, scared, while the enemies advance relentlessly from all sides with their weapons ready for the attack. However, before the blades strike the monsters, the dark silhouette of Weiss suddenly appears behind one of the hooded men and orders them to stop right there. With a terrifyingly furious look, the young man questions what they think they are doing with his dear companions. In an extremely swift movement, Weiss firmly grabs the wrist of the hooded men's leader, preventing him from moving his dagger. Without giving time for reaction, the young man slams the attacker violently against the ground with a brutal move. The other members of the group surround the young man immediately and draw their blades. Furious at his intrusion, Weiss places himself protectively in front of his beasts and demands to know who they are, warning coldly that he does not want to hurt anyone unnecessarily and that it is better for them to back off. The leader of the hooded men just points his dagger back at the young man, completely ignoring the danger warning. Tension increases in the clearing while the opponents surround the young man and analyze the situation with caution. Annoyed by the pack's audacity, Weiss repeats his question about what they intended to do with his companions there. To the young man's total surprise, the leader of the group speaks up and calls him directly by his own name. The hooded man mocks upon hearing Weiss call the monsters companions and states with coldness that those filthy beasts exist only to be purged from the earth. Weiss gets extremely intrigued and asks how on earth that pack of strangers knows his name. The masked man reveals that the group had already been watching every move of the young man for quite some time. He shows a sinister look under his hood and declares that they are the executioners responsible for carrying out divine punishment in the name of the goddess Halumna. Weiss confesses he does not understand anything of that religious madness, but makes it clear he is not going to leave things like this, with his eyes sparking with anger. The young man lets out a powerful shout, warning that he will never forgive anyone who dares to mock his valuable allies. The leader of the executioners just observes the young warrior's fury with a calm and calculating look. He realizes that any dialogue from then on would be a waste of time and makes a sign for his men to prepare their weapons. Without any hesitation, the hooded man gives the definitive order to begin the execution of everyone there. Weiss shouts for his pets to stay alert and prepare themselves, as the enemies are advancing to attack. The masked warriors leap toward Weiss from several different angles in a coordinated and lethal manner. The stone golem reacts quickly and delivers a heavy punch that throws one of the assassins far away with extreme violence. The little dragon also jumps into action and spits a blast of burning fire that scorches the enemies who were trying to approach from the sides. However, one of the more skilled executioners manages to dodge the flames and advances at high speed with a spinning slash of cutting wind. Weiss demonstrates great reflexes by dodging the deadly aerial attack at the final millisecond. Even after missing the first blow, the hooded warrior recovers in the air and advances, determined to drive his dagger into Weiss's chest. The young man focuses his senses and manages to track the swift movement of the enemy blade without losing his combat stance. The slash passes extremely close to his neck, showing that those opponents possess truly refined assassination techniques. Annoyed at failing once again, the assassin curses quietly and spins his body to deliver another swift attack. While dodging the blows, Weiss analyzes the opponent's combat style and notices he possesses incredibly fast footwork and very precise sword strikes. He notes that every movement of the enemy is calculated to hit vital points without giving the victim any chance of survival. Realizing that staying only on the defensive would be a terrible disadvantage, Weiss activates the power in his arm again and decides to go on the offensive once and for all. Upon witnessing the fantastic transformation of the young man's arm, the executioner opens his eyes wide and whispers startled that he is facing a true monster. The leader of the executioners leaps from above against the young man, shouting that he will receive divine punishment immediately. Weiss just cracks a confident smile and prepares his fist loaded with the powerful blue energy of the sea serpent. He delivers a devastating punch straight into the ground, creating an immense shockwave that shatters the dirt floor and scatters rocks everywhere. The overwhelming force of the impact hits the attacker's dead center, throwing one of them far away as he lets out a cry of pain. The other executioners watch everything horrified through the curtain of dust that formed on the battlefield. Realizing that the opponent is much stronger than they imagined, the survivors of the pack decide to retreat immediately to save their lives. Weiss observes the quiet forest at dusk and calmly notes that the enemies ended up fleeing the fight. However, one of the injured invaders ended up being left behind and lets out a groan of pain while trying to move on the stone ground. The Prota steps forward, approaching slowly, and comments that he already had his suspicions from the moment he observed that hooded warrior's movement style during the combat. Removing the mask of the defeated attacker, Weiss confirms that the dangerous warrior was actually a woman with long dark hair. While this occurs in the forest, the last rays of the afternoon sun illuminate the imposing facade of the village church inside the temple. Captain Helke guides Dance and Marcia to the main altar to meet with the local religious leader. The priest with glasses cracks a gentle smile and sincerely thanks the group for protecting the village from the terrible attacks of the beasts. Helke then makes the formal introductions, introducing Marcia and the young Dance, who greets the clergyman in a super casual way. Although the meeting is taking place, Dance whispers worriedly to her friend about having started the meeting without Weiss's presence, but Marcia reminds her they could not keep the clergyman waiting. The clergyman stares at the demon girl with seriousness and asks if it is true that she possesses the forbidden gift of commanding monsters. Directly super proud of her magical ability, Dance smiles from ear to ear and confirms immediately that she and the beasts are practically best friends. Upon hearing the confirmation, the priest's gaze freezes instantly while he reflects in silence on how that girl is a completely impure being. Suddenly, a deafening noise echoes through the temple as the huge wooden entrance doors are burst open with violence. Several of those same hooded executioners invade the place in a threatening way. Surrounding the girls in the middle of the altar, Dance is left completely frozen upon finding herself cornered by several sharp blades pointed directly at her neck. Captain Helke is horrified by the cowardly ambush and demands to know what the meaning of all that betrayal on the priest's part is. The religious leader maintains his cold posture and solemnly declares it is the holy duty of the church to eliminate that living heresy in the name of the goddess Holumna, announcing she will be judged right there with a dark look. He adds in a threatening way that Weiss will also receive the same sentence, right after trembling with anger for being lured into that disgusting trap. Dance gnashes her teeth, furious at the clergyman's audacity. Without wasting time, she pulls out her magic crystals and yells orders for the cute ogre and the giant toad to emerge for battle. The two immense beasts materialize in the middle of the sacred hall with a deafening crash that shakes the entire structure of the temple. The demon girl shouts furious, saying she is not going to stand still waiting for them to finish her, leaving the priest completely speechless before that sudden summoning. She points with authority at the old man and warns him that he made a terrible mistake by underestimating the great Dance, promising to make him bitterly regret his betrayal. The colossal beasts position themselves protectively behind their tamer, glaring at the pack of hooded men with a deadly look. The clergyman sweats coldly with anger upon seeing the presence of such filthy monsters profaning the sacred ground of his beloved goddess. The two pets emit threatening snarls, just waiting for their mistress's command to attack with full force. Without hesitating, Dance points forward and orders her dear companions to crush all those attackers without mercy or pity. The creatures leap at high speed against the altar, aiming directly at the treacherous priest. The priest curses furious in the face of the imminent attack, but refuses to back a single step from his position. With a fanatical look, he shouts for the filthy beasts not to dare take another step in his direction. In that instant, an extremely bright golden magic barrier expands around the altar instantaneously. The impact of the beasts strikes the mystical barrier dead center, generating an immense explosion of energy that stops the pet monster's advance. The shield of divine light completely protects the priest and his assistants from any attack coming from outside the altar. Dance watches everything in total shock upon realizing that that impassable barrier prevents any of her allies from getting close to the clergyman. The clergyman mocks in an arrogant way, stating that the goddess protects them and that none of those profane arts will ever be able to touch them. Helka demands immediate explanations, asking what the true meaning of that insanity is and why he is pointing his weapons against the saviors of the village. The priest stares at the captain with coldness, reminding her that she is also a devotee of the church and ordering her to arrest that wicked woman immediately. He reiterates that the goddess would never forgive the heresy of someone who controls monsters and demands that the sentence be carried out without any more waste of time. The captain of the knights stares at the religious leader with an extremely furious look, feeling an immense revolt in the face of that blatant injustice. Dance begins to sweat coldly with worry, not knowing quite what to do to overcome that impenetrable magical defense. Seeing the jam they got themselves into, Marcia suggests in an impatient way that they simply destroy the entire church to manage to escape. The blonde argues with conviction that on certain complicated occasions like this, fleeing from there as fast as possible is the smartest move of all. Dance stares at her friend with determination and immediately agrees with the idea of making a retreat once and for all. She extends her hand forward with authority and orders her two monsters to cause absolute chaos in the place to clear a path for their escape. Attending to Dance's command, the giant ogre delivers a devastating punch to the walls of the church, making everything begin to crumble. He continues breaking the supporting columns of the temple with his heavy fists in a merciless fashion. Meanwhile, the giant toad uses its long tongue to shatter the altar walls, leaving the priests in total panic. The priest shouts furious, asking if they have any idea how old and sacred that church is, but the beasts continue the destruction without giving a care. Dance lets out a hysterical laugh of victory and celebrates, saying that that is what happens to anyone who dares mess with her. However, the church ceiling begins to give way rapidly, and immense blocks of stone begin to plummet from up there in a dangerous way. A heavy piece of debris falls right on Dance's head, making her pass out immediately while Marcia screams in despair upon seeing the scene. The sacred temple does not withstand the damage and collapses completely in the middle of an immense cloud of dust and debris. From afar, the only thing that remains of the once beautiful and imposing church structure are completely destroyed ruins under the late afternoon sky. Weiss listens to the account intently in the forest and shows himself quite surprised to understand the disaster that ended up happening at the local church. Marcia confirms the story exhausted and explains that by a very narrow margin, she managed to drag her unconscious friend out of the debris before the final collapse. Weiss sincerely thanks Captain Helka for helping to rescue and look after Dance at such a difficult and delicate moment. Helka looks away very shaken and offers a sincere apology, saying she is not in the emotional state to talk much at that moment. Marcia hurries her companions and warns that they need to get out of that region as fast as possible before it is too late. She explains that the influential Church of Holumna will surely send professional hunters and assassins after them at any moment, which leaves the young man quite thoughtful. The guide details that all the neighboring nations worship this deity, and that their doctrine considers demons and beasts as impure enemies that must be totally eliminated from the face of the earth. While observing Helka from afar, Weiss realizes that even the loyal captain must be deeply shaken to see that her own church tried to eliminate the man who saved the lives of everyone in the village. Marcia insists they should take advantage of nightfall to slip away quietly through the forest and throw off the pursuers who are on their way. Meanwhile, before the smoking ruins of the temple, the priest speeches in a dramatic way to the villagers, saying that that tragedy was the work of terrible heretics. The residents listen startled and sad while the priest asks for his flock not to fear what is to come. Raising his arms before the sacred image that remained intact, the clergyman continues his fiery sermon with a lot of authority. He ensures that the goddess Holumna will bring in the future a glorious destiny where all the evil and impurities of the world will finally be swept away once and for all. The man points with fury and shouts that their sacred sanctuary was cowardly destroyed by wicked and sinful hands. He accuses Weiss and Dance directly of being agents sent by the fearsome demon king, describing them as profane abominations who control beasts and transform their own bodies. To make the situation worse, the traitor publicly accuses Captain Helki of having been seduced by the forces of darkness and of having become a terrible heretic unworthy of trust. In the face of that blatant manipulation, the clergyman calls upon all the children of the goddess to take up arms and prepare for the war of defense of the faith. He rants with hatred, saying that that land will never know peace until they manage to hunt down and eliminate all the heretics with their own hands. The crowd of faithful responds to the call by raising their fists and letting out fiery battle cries in a sign of support for the priest. While hatred spreads through the village, the group of fugitives continues walking hurriedly through the forest under the nightlight. Weiss goes on carrying the unconscious Dance in his arms in a protective way, while questioning if they are on the correct path to get out of that thick woods. Marcia looks back with a very worried and thoughtful expression about their uncertain future. She stares at the assassin woman who was defeated earlier, and who is now being brought along by Helka. Questioning in silence if it was really a good idea to bring her with them, Weiss replies in a pragmatic way that they could not simply leave her behind injured, and reinforces that everyone's main focus now must be only managing to escape from there safely. In that instant, the young demon lets out a slight groan of pain and finally begins to slowly regain her consciousness. Upon opening her eyes and realizing she is being carried in the young man's arms, Dance takes a huge start and starts shouting, blushing, asking what he thinks he is doing. Weiss comments relieved that it is good to see she woke up, but the girl complains totally embarrassed for being carried in such an embarrassing princess-style carry way. The young man just ignores his friend's protests of embarrassment and calmly asks for her to stay quiet so as not to draw attention in the forest. Suddenly, the group freezes on the spot upon hearing the muffled sound of horse hooves approaching rapidly in the middle of the woods. Several horses run at high speed down the nearby trail, raising dust and confirming that the search patrol is already active. Weiss and the girls crouch immediately behind some thick bushes, watching the riders pass very close to where they are hidden. The young man whispers worriedly, upon noting that the pursuers truly are the highly trained knights of the village. Dance whispers quickly to Helka and suggests that the captain just use her authority to give a false order and send the subordinates away from there. However, Helki shakes her head in a melancholy way and replies quietly that unfortunately she can do nothing more to help them that way. The blue-haired warrior explains with sadness that by this time the church must have already labeled her as a heretical traitor, and that fanatical faith severely punishes any sign of heresy. She says that in that region the laws of the church are considered absolute truths, and that anyone who dares to defy religious orders is simply wiped from existence without leaving a trace. With a desolate look, the captain concludes with bitterness that to society and to her own people, she is now considered practically a dead person. Dance is deeply moved and feels very guilty upon realizing that that honored warrior lost everything just because she decided to protect them. Suddenly, a sharp noise cuts through the air, and an arrow fired by surprise grazes Dance's face, startling the girl immediately. The projectile hits the dirt ground right before them with force, revealing that the presence of the fugitive group was finally discovered by the guards. The soldiers shout that they heard voices in that direction and begin to surround the bushes, making Dance call out desperately for Weiss's name in search of help. Afraid of the approaching soldiers, Dance asks for Weiss to simply finish off all the pursuers in that usual brutal way. However, the young man refuses the idea, explaining that they are just ordinary citizens and that attacking them would make the group truly become a pack of criminals. Dance stammers distressed, saying that if they do not fight, they will never manage to escape that dangerous encirclement. Suddenly, an idea strikes the girl's mind, and she concludes excited that the only viable way out then is simply to run away from there. She opens a confident smile and declares that they are going to run for it, being much faster than any of those guards on horseback. Without wasting time, the young tamer activates a red magic circle and conjures her pet unicorn to perform an immediate body fusion with Weiss. The young man feels the reddish magical energy flow intensely through his entire being as he begins the mystical transformation process. Meanwhile, the guards approach the bushes with swords drawn and shout, ordering for everyone to come out of there with their hands up. However, an immense beam of reddish energy suddenly explodes from the middle of the leaves, startling the soldiers immediately. A majestic and terrifying black unicorn with a glowing horn and red eyes emerges from the shadows of the forest, leaving the pursuers completely in panic. The guards begin to shout in despair upon coming across that gigantic beast right before them in the middle of the woods. The mystical animal takes a gigantic leap over the trees, comfortably carrying the entire group on its back with ease. Dance lets out a victorious laugh and encourages Weiss to run with everything, without needing to save energy or hold back. The soldiers left behind watch the escape jaw-dropped and comment startled about the unbelievable speed of that beast, associating everything with that evil power that the goddess so condemns. The black unicorn runs like lightning down the dark forest trail, leaving behind only a huge curtain of dust high above. Under the bluish glow of the 3 crescent moons, the mysterious wolf-like warrior continues observing the movement in a silent and attentive way. She maintains her cold and focused countenance while tracking the traveler's escape through the mountains. With her yellow eyes glowing intensely in the darkness, the mysterious figure quietly pronounces Weiss and Dance's names in an intriguing way. Back at the village, one of the officers kneels before the priest to report that the group of heretics unfortunately managed to escape the encirclement. The guard apologizes humbly and explains that the fugitives were much stronger than expected, ensuring that he has already sent reinforcements and is expanding the search area through the forests. The priest completely loses his patience and rants furious, ordering the officer to go personally to the field and spread wanted posters through all the neighboring towns immediately. He makes it clear that he does not care about costs or rewards in money, demanding that they use any method necessary to capture the heretics as fast as possible alone at the destroyed altar. The man stares at the sacred image and murmurs with fanaticism that they need to capture those sinners as soon as possible. He prays fervently under the divine light of the stained glass window, piously believing that his beloved goddess is watching and guiding his every step there. However, high up in her mystical plane, the goddess Halumna observes the situation with deep disgust upon thinking about those beasts and impure creatures that inhabit the earth. While patting a small bird on her finger, the deity reflects coldly on how there is no space for these loathsome beings in the beautiful world she governs. With a calm and merciless countenance, she promises herself that she will wipe even the last of these cursed creatures from existence once and for all. The goddess cracks a gelid smile while planning to rebuild a perfect and wonderful world that exists solely to satisfy her own desires. While these divine plans unfold, the black unicorn continues galloping at high speed under the mantle of the silent night, holding on with all her strength so as not to fall. Marcia shouts startled, warning that the animal is not slowing down its pace, making Dance call out desperately for Weiss to stop the run. However, the mystical beast just gnashes its teeth furious and runs with even more violence. Completely ignoring the girl's pleas, Dance realizes with panic that her companion lost control over the body fusion again and is about to enter a state of total fury. Sighing with irritation, the young demon prepares to act and grumbles about how the warrior always gives the same kind of trouble when he merges with her monsters. She takes a deep breath and puffs her cheeks to gather all the air necessary in her lungs to perform her cancellation technique. The girl shouts very loudly in the beast's ear, questioning with impatience how many more times he is going to end up losing his head in the middle of a transformation. She demands that he learn to protect her properly next time, causing the reddish glow of the animal's wild gaze to begin to hesitate for an instant. The impact of the abrupt movement shakes the mount and causes everyone to be thrown forward in the middle of a lot of dust. Marcia and Dance plunge from the horse's back and roll clumsily across the soft grass of the forest. The demon girl gets up a bit disheveled and tries to recover from the fall, wiping the dirt from her face in a hurried way. She spots Weiss sitting with his back on the ground just ahead and runs in his direction to check if her companion is all right after the fusion cancellation. Upon being questioned about his physical state, the young man lowers his head discouraged and confesses with frustration that he ended up losing control of himself once more. Weiss gets up with Dance's help while trying to recover his strength after all the mental wear caused by the fusion effort. Suddenly, the stone golem and the little dragon appear guiding the group's large wagon, leaving Dance extremely joyful to reunite with her faithful little pets. She suggests they all get into the vehicle to travel without stopping until they get completely out of the territory controlled by the terrible Church of Halumna, pointing out that there is a safe town just ahead. However, Captain Helke speaks up with a sad look and warns in a melancholy way that she will need to leave the group right there. She explains with her head lowered that it would be far too dangerous for them to continue traveling in the company of a disgraced knight who is now hunted by the church itself. The warrior reiterates with bitterness that she simply cannot put her new savior's lives at risk by traveling alongside them. Annoyed by that pessimistic talk, Dance takes Helki by the arm and tells her to stop talking so much nonsense once and for all. With a big friendly smile, the demon girl humorously orders for the captain to just shut her mouth and get into the wagon with the others already. Helki cradles the injured warrior woman in her arms, while commenting to Weiss about the importance of him learning to differentiate allies from enemies. Receiving the young man's sincere agreement, Helka reflects in silence on the word allies, feeling a hint of hope reborn in her heart after so many trials. Suddenly, Weiss interrupts her thoughts and goes on high alert upon sensing a strong presence approaching rapidly from the rear. The young man warns everyone that something very powerful is coming toward them, raising the question of whether it would be the pursuing soldiers from the church. Without wasting time, he orders everyone to run to take shelter in the large wagon while they prepare for the worst. The vehicle's wheels begin to spin swiftly amid the dust in a desperate attempt to escape the mysterious threat. Weiss looks to the side and is shocked to see a dark silhouette of a wolf running extremely fast side by side with the wagon. The warrior shouts surprised upon realizing that the beast accompanying them is actually a mystical black wolf. He alerts everyone about the gigantic wolf that displays sharp claws and a terrifying dark energy. The terrible predator with reddish-pink eyes glares at the group with a deadly look while matching its pace with the vehicle. The stone golem tries to quicken its pace alongside the beast to ensure the physical protection of its owners. Marcia shouts in panic, asking to go faster, as the terrible predator is already practically on top of their wagon. Dance tries to give strength to her stone golem, shouting that she fully trusts in its strength to get them out of that dangerous situation. Weiss realizes that the golem will not be able to handle the pressure alone for long and considers transforming to help, but fears losing control of his mental faculties again. The young man decides that the only alternative is to try to channel the unicorn's power directly through his own body without performing the full body fusion. He concentrates to the maximum and tries to activate the mystical energy to fight the imminent danger. However, the young man realizes frustrated that his body is not transforming, questioning himself why he cannot allow the beast to possess him like before. Marcia tries to calm him down, explaining in a gentle way that he probably still has not gotten used to the possession process and just needs more training. Upon hearing this, Dance gets thoughtful and sad as she questions what her usefulness in the group would be if Weiss managed to use all that power alone whenever he pleased. Captain Helka interrupts her friend's conversation, shouting, alerting annoyed that this is definitely not the ideal time to be having a chat. The black wolf roars in a deafening way as it leaps fiercely against the group's vehicle to begin the devastating attack. However, an immense beam of purple energy cuts through the air all of a sudden, striking the ground with a terrifying violence right in front of them. A commanding female silhouette emerges in the middle of the purple energy mist, floating in a majestic way before everyone. The mysterious, silver-haired wolf warrior reveals herself completely before the group of fugitives in an imposing fashion. Weiss and Dance take a step back, completely paralyzed with astonishment before such an overwhelming presence. Captain Helka opens her eyes wide in total shock upon recognizing the legendary mystical figure right before her immediately. With a penetrating and glowing look, the warrior reveals herself to be none other than the fearsome demon king Tatenda. Without showing any effort, the powerful Tatenda raises her hand and conjures several glowing magic circles in the air around her. She fires multiple beams of destructive purple light toward the group with a crushing force. Weiss acts fast and uses his water control power to create an immense bluish mystical shield and block all the impact of the devastating attack. The young man supports himself on the rather worn stone ground while the smoke begins to dissipate gradually around his companions. Weiss remains firm in front of his friends, with his armored fist flashing blue energy, ready to protect them from any new threat. Tatenda observes the successful defense with an intrigued little smile and comments with disdain that the young man's block was actually not bad at all. The warrior shouts, furious, demanding to know who she is, warning that he will never go easy on anyone who dares touch his precious companions. She questions him in an ironic way about who he considers his allies, asking if he really includes the monsters and even the goddess's own followers in that category. Weiss focuses his serious look on her and confirms he is referring to all of them, including the valuable Captain Helke, who is by his side upon hearing the young man's convinced answer. The powerful Tatenda lets out a slight murmur and comments thoughtfully that he is indeed a very strange and peculiar human. She remains static in the middle of the forest with her long silver hair swaying gently with the night breeze. With an enigmatic look, the demon leader wonders in silence if that mysterious young man will become a valuable ally for her forces in the future, or a terrible hindrance. Without giving another word, Tatenda simply disappears into the air in the middle of an immense explosion of purple energy, leaving everyone in complete silence. Weiss stares at the empty spot, intrigued, and notes surprised that terrible presence simply vanished without leaving any trace behind. Dance makes a bummed face and grumbles that this Demon King talk immediately reminds her of her terrible and grumpy office boss from when she lived in her old world on Earth, back at the vehicle under the starry sky. Dance comments worriedly that their situation got much more complicated now that they need to avoid both the Demon King's territory and the territory of the goddess's church. Helki suddenly remembers that Marcia acts as a merchant and asks if she knows any safe place for them to hide. Receiving a confident thumbs up from the blonde, who ensures she will take care of all the group's needs from then on, Marcia reveals that there is an independent town located to the west of that region that does not belong to either side of the political and religious conflict. She suggests that the best plan of action at the moment is to travel directly to this neutral place to get some rest. Decided to rest before continuing the journey, the travelers set up a temporary camp in front of a dark cave to spend the night in safety. While packing things up, Dance stares at the hooded prisoner who continues sleeping deeply in the wagon and wonders in silence for how much longer that supposed professional assassin plans to continue in that heavy sleep, sitting near the campfire next to the young man. Marcia cracks a smile of relief and happily celebrates that everyone managed to escape whole and without a single scratch from that terrible jam. However, noticing Weiss's thoughtful and distant countenance, the blonde asks in a sweet way if there is anything worrying her friend's mind. The young man stares at the immense darkness of the cave entrance just ahead and confesses thoughtfully that he is just wondering where that mysterious tunnel really leads.